and welcome to this home edition of Politics Today, news review of the year that was 2021. I'm not doing it in the studio because I've taken a lateral flow test and I've tested positive, so I can't turn up to the studio. So I'm very pleased that such great short notice. I'm joined by two stellar political guests in Robin Benson, who's a Christian commentator, together with Michael McCann, the director of Israel-Britain Alliance. I'll start off with you, Michael. What are your thoughts on 2021 in terms of a year of politics and what's happened this year?
Well, it's been pretty extraordinary. If I had to sum it up, Simon, I would say that we've lived through an extraordinary period of time, and when the history is written, I'm sure that's how it will be recorded, but without any extraordinary leaders. And I mean that across the whole globe. There's no extraordinary leader. In the UK, we've got Boris, who's stumbling from one disaster to another. We've got the leader of the Labour Party, who is, by his very nature, is pretty charismatic. He hasn't got any charisma whatsoever. We've got the Liberal Democrat leader, who probably nobody knows. Probably the most the biggest known face outside of London politics is probably Nicola Sturgeon. We've had an arms race by each of the devolved administrations to who could introduce the toughest COVID restrictions as soon as possible. And all running through this, we've had Dominic Cummings sniping from the sidelines, and we've had all sorts of other issues going on in terms of Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol, and of course Macron going for election in France again, so he's been trying to up the ante against the UK. And then across the pond, we've got a leader of the largest superpower on the planet who doesn't know if it's New York or New Year. So it's been an extraordinary period of time, but no doubt it has been some of the things that have taken place will go down in the history books. What won't go down in the history books is those that have led us during this extraordinary time.
Robin, what are your thoughts on this extremely difficult? Plus, also, we've seen that our politics has become very, very volatile, particularly as we've seen the impact of COVID-19 on government policy and on our MPs and our parliamentarians.
Well, I think you've summed it up, Simon. The coronavirus is the theme that's been running through the whole of the past 12 months, and the ups and downs that have gone along with that. We're released a bit from restrictions, and then we're back in restrictions again, and then we're released a bit, and the untold damage that has done to the economy of the country over the last year, that shows no signs whatsoever of making a real recovery. In fact, as we record this program, businesses are crying out that they're going to be hit yet again with the fear of further restrictions as we approach the end of the year, and the increase in infection rate with the Omicron mutation. And through it all, as Michael has already pointed out, there just has been at times a sense of chaos at Westminster, and I'm not sure about the devolved governments, but I suppose because I'm living here in England, the news I watch tends to centre around the London bubble, with the odd mention of the other three national parliaments and what they're doing. And I don't know. I think the past year has just been chaotic. As Michael has pointed out, there has been a complete lack of leadership. But with the lack of leadership has gone an further undermining of trust in government structures and government leaders, which I'm sure we'll get round to talking about, as the programme goes on, because there have been so many scandals, throughout the year, to the point now where I suspect that a high proportion of the British public are just absolutely fed up to the back teeth with those who are supposed to be leading them, who don't seem to know, what to do to lead the country.
Michael, it seems very much like at the very start of January in 2021 is finishing exactly like it is in December 2021. And on the 5th of January, we had our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, call for another national lockdown. to last in England until mid-February. So that's almost 6 weeks of a national lockdown. Of course, then this was then followed by the COVID-19 Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine rollout and what have you. So how do you assess how the government has handled the COVID-19 crisis?
Well, I think you can break it down into, say, 3 parts. The first part is, and we've got to be mindful of this, because the world has never, in modern times, has never experienced anything like this. Okay, so, and whilst there is no world global collective, the United Nations and some of the organisations like World Health, etc., are allegedly, meant to be leading us in matters like this, but they don't really. And we know, for example, that COVID had its fingerprints China had its fingerprints all over the World Health Organization and controlling information with regards to Wuhan and what actually happened there. And we're still none the wiser. In fact, it still could have come out of a lab, this whole thing. And then we, as a country, as the UK, focused on that for a second, I think we did remarkably well. The government took a huge gamble and invested an enormous sum of money in the AstraZeneca vaccine. I personally had 2 of those jabs. I had my booster a few days ago, and I believe that will protect me from Omicron and what may come away that in terms of the new strain that's emerged. And then we get to the situation where Matt Hancock commits the crime which has plagued politicians for centuries, which is having a mistress and then being caught on camera, and then focusing attention on this. And then we get the whole Allegra Stratton bizarre, bubbling and crying all over, this great media person who couldn't control herself to make a statement because she was in a ridiculous situation where she was stupid enough to do a sort of mock press conference inside the actual press conference room where there's all these cameras. And all someone needs to do is press one little button and all the information is there, all the evidence is there. So it's a mixture of great resilience and superb skills of our scientific fields and people working in medicine. I don't criticise the politicians in terms of how they had to react to it, because that was a moving feast all over the world, and ultimately we get through those stages as we did, albeit that there will be people who will complain about care homes and the number of deaths and so on and so forth. But what really concerns me about this whole thing, particularly coming from the northern part of the British Isles, is what governments have got away with. They all all the devolved administrations, all the incumbents were all re-elected last year. But in Scotland, we have got record numbers of drug deaths in Europe. Our education, which was previously one of the best in the world, is going down the tubes. And in terms of the National Health Service, there was already a crisis before COVID began. And of course, the same could be argued for Wales. I don't know so much about Northern Ireland. And then in terms of the national scene, we know we've other things, big issues like mental health and other illnesses which haven't been treated because COVID has been given the priority. So I think we come out of it with, I think in terms of our politicians, they've done well in some areas, they've done very poorly in others. And in terms of the people like Matt Hancock and all this Christmas party nonsense, then they really have looked exceptionally bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as far as the Northern Ireland situation is concerned, although I don't live there anymore, I've got family back there, and it's the rest of the UK in miniature. So what Michael has highlighted, as far as Scotland is concerned, as far as Wales is concerned, was just replicated in Northern Ireland. But on top of that, you had the crisis over the protocols attached to Britain's withdrawal from the European Union, and that whole mess, which at one point, early on in the year, literally caused empty shelves in major supermarket chains. And some supermarkets were buying goods from other supermarkets and repackaging them with their packaging because they couldn't get supplies of particular items. It was absolute and utter madness and chaos.
Mike, also want to bring in a bit of foreign policy. I mean, you mentioned President Biden earlier, but how much has President Biden's emergence on the world scene as the US president, particularly knowing the special relationship between Britain and America, had an impact upon the world?
Oh, I have to be honest, I think his election has been a complete and utter disaster of Olympian proportions. I mean, I've got to be honest with you, I was an MP, I was a councillor, I was a council leader, and did all that sort of stuff. And at times you felt the pressure, particularly when you were a member of the United Kingdom Parliament. And I was a young man. I mean, I was in my late 40s when I got elected, and still consider myself reasonably fit. And touch wood, I haven't had any serious illnesses ever in my life. I've had that good fortune, but it must. For a man, if you were the president of the United States at this age, in your 40s or 50s, or even your 60s, it would be a big burden. But to do it, this guy's approaching 80, and he's just not up to it. He's not up to it. He's not leading the free world. He's not got a clue sometimes what's going on. That's self-evident by some of the video feed that we see. And we currently have got a superpower, utterly rudderless. They don't put him in front of the cameras. That tells you everything you need to know, because they can't afford to put him in front of the cameras. He's got a raging hard left wing inside the Democratic Party, which is akin to our Jeremy Corbyn style, in terms of these people like Ilhan Omar and others. And he's not controlling any of it. So in American desperation to get rid of Trump, and he had many, many faults, particularly good in the issues that I deal with on a daily basis in terms of Israel, but nonetheless, they were desperate to get rid of him. They didn't put in someone who was young enough and capable enough to handle this type of pressure. They've picked a guy who's on his way out. And incidentally, the biggest laugh, which surely must have been a joke, is when the suggestion he was going to run again. I mean, I nearly fell off I nearly swallowed my Weetabix whole when I heard that one. So his leadership has been a disaster. Whether he lasts the full term, I don't know. And then that gives you your next problem, because look at who his vice president is, Kamala Harris, who is equally, she doesn't have any of the difficulties that Sleepy Joe has in terms of keeping up with the pace of daily life before he has to have a snooze. But she's proven that when the kitchen gets too hot, she just disappears and she's nowhere to be found. So, thank goodness that the electoral terms for American presidents are only 4 years.
Could be a very long couple of years until America's next presidential election in 2024. Robin, we've also seen the dramatic resignation of Dominic Cummings this year, known as Boris's brains, who was instrumental in getting Lord Frost as the main negotiator for Brexit on behalf of the European Union. And it's ever since he's gone or has been forced to resign from the government have been running a liberal progressive government. And it looks like Carrie Johnson, who married Boris earlier this year, is in the driving seat and has appointed her extreme liberal friends, including one advisor to the Prime Minister in 10 Downing Street, who's a former member of the Revolutionary Communist Party. We also had Allegra Stratton, the communications director, who voted for the Liberal Democrats, who voted for the Green Party. Has this party, the Conservative Party, gone so far to the liberal left and the progressive left that they've alienated all their Conservative supporters? And this is also one of the reasons why the Conservative Party are rallying against Boris Johnson at this time.
Yes.
Elaborate.
You summed it up pretty well, Simon. Dominic Cummings, when he was in 10 Downing Street, was probably the one person everybody loved to hate. The media, other political operatives, and all the rest of it. And you're right. Once he's gone, when you actually sit back and assess what has happened to the team in 10 Downing Street and the cabinet since he's gone, it's like it's just turned into one shambolic mess after another, which actually, Michael might disagree, but to me, that's scary. If Boris was dependent upon this one guy to try and hold everything together, what does it say about his ability to actually steer the cabinet, steer the government, now that this linchpin has disappeared? And it has been one scandal after another, particularly in the last couple of months, one thing after another, to the point where, as we all know, the three of us know, that in the last week, it is clear beyond a shadow of a doubt that the knives are out. There is a sizable group in the Parliamentary Conservative Party who I think, if Boris doesn't get his act together, are prepared to do a Maggie Thatcher on him and knife him in the back and kick him out and replace him with somebody else. Well, Simon, you may remember, I remember the Politics Today program before the general election. Yeah, you're smiling.
I did very
where
well.
I came on really strongly in opposition to Boris, although we hadn't got much of a choice. It was either Boris or Jeremy Corbyn, but I came out very strongly against him. And I remember the look of horror on your face. I don't know whether the camera picked it up or not. And I'm sorry to say, Simon, I told you so. You know,
it's good to have
we are. You know, I genuinely am sorry that I've been proven right. That he has turned out okay. He's got us out of the EU, wonderful. But in most other respects, he has turned out to be a disaster. He's a bluffer.
But the thing is that in terms of there's one thing that could have been worse than Boris Johnson winning in 2019, and that would have been Jeremy Corbyn.
No, I totally agree with you. I agree with you, Michael.
That was going to happen. But the problem is, Boris played the clown. When he was in Mayor of London, he won 2 mayoral elections in London, which is a left-wing city, right, by and large. Okay, so he won, and that's why they picked him, because he was a winning machine. And he played up to this caricature, all the silly pictures he got taken or whatever. Now he's become the caricature. Yeah. And in terms of Dominic Cummings, you know something? I know how government operates. I know how local government operates. I know how, if I had my time over again and I had the knowledge I have now, I would be a magnificent politician, because I know what all the weaknesses are and what you would have to do. And the position is that Dominic Cummings was criticised, and this is why I was willing to give him a bit of time. Dominic Cummings was criticised by all the people you would expect to criticise him, the people with the vested interests, the people that don't want anything shaken up, the civil service mandarins who meet in their clubs and they discuss, just like Yes Minister, it might be a caricature, but that programme got more right than it did wrong, sitting in their little clubs making decisions about the future of the country. The permanent government, that's what the senior echelons of the civil service are. So I was willing to think, this guy's going to shake it up, I'm with him. Because I saw good ideas being quashed by the people that didn't like those good ideas. And I think it's impossible for government ministers to run government departments with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees like the National Health Service in the way it's currently organised. So I was up for Dominic Cummings. I wanted to see where he was going to take it. But he's now turned out like the scorned lover. I mean, he's been utterly pathetic. You know, all absolutely stage managed in terms of the select committee hearings, releasing little snippets of information, and he's just looking like an utter fool now. And so all my aspirations think he's been attacked because he's attacking the establishment, and therefore you should defend someone in that situation. They've all gone because he just dived in my estimations because he just became like everybody else. Once they get dumped, he behaved like a scorned lover, and he's just been sniping for the sidelines. And now, when he says anything at all, people don't take him seriously.
And Robin, we also saw 2 major international conferences take place on the British Isles. Firstly, we saw the G7 summit that was held in June in Cornwall, and then the COP26 climate change conference in Michael's native city of Glasgow. What did you make of these 2 conferences? If we start with the G7 first, because I think what we saw there is a clear departure from previous G7 summits, in a sense, reinforcing democracy, reinforcing liberty and freedom. And instead, what we effectively saw was a very liberal, progressive, woke agenda that did nothing to challenging the emerging military threats posed by China and Russia.
Yeah, you're right. Again, but in some senses, both of these gatherings of world leaders, representatives from nations, were in some senses within the sphere of, again, the dread virus. So that in itself had its impact upon both gatherings. And the stance that nations had adopted, particularly maybe with the G7, because it's, the formative nations, those that are, the biggest economies, the stance that those nations had taken towards dealing with that actually, I think, filtered down into the things that were discussed, the things such as they are that came out of the conference. I mean, I'm sorry, can you even remember anything constructive that came out of the G7? I mean, it's so long ago. I mean, practically speaking, it's so long ago. It was almost like, to me, it was like a non-event, and there was more time spent by the commentators talking about how the guys got to the conference and how they left it, what they were doing in their spare time, where they were meeting up. There didn't seem to me to be anything of substance that really came out of that conference that has benefited the rest of the world, but some of that is due to the virus and the restrictions which played into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, what are your thoughts on the UN climate crisis conference known as COP26 that took place in your home city of Glasgow, in which our mainstream media portrayed it, including Boris Johnson himself said that we're 1 minute to midnight to save the planet, and yet we see that China still continues to burn fossil fuels, the same as Russia, and even in Germany and other nations. So what's your thoughts on the COP26 conference?
Well, I've got to be honest with you. The biggest, most single life-changing contribution for me in terms of watching it was David Attenborough's contribution. The man is approaching his century, still looking very fit and healthy for his age. And I know that your viewers, some of them will disagree with me. I've got no doubt about that. I think we are a minute to midnight. I think we can see a change, dramatic change in the climate. My daughter's on the other side of the world in Australia. Sadly, we haven't seen her for 18 months because of COVID, and nobody's allowed to travel in or out of Australia, or there's very strict rules in travel. But the bottom line is some of the extreme temperatures in that part of the world. And then even in terms of, I've seen in my lifetime watched a change of the seasons. Like up in Scotland at the moment, normally we would be, when I was a kid, I'd be expecting snow, and now it's very damp and wet, and you tend to get the bad weather round about, end of January, February now. So the seasons have actually changed in our country, and in terms of the weather we can anticipate or expect to get. So I think we are at a minute to midnight. I think that we've got a real problem, and here's the politics of it. And I won't use China because they're an authoritarian state and they'll do whatever the heck they want and they won't care about anybody else. Let me pick India, the biggest democracy in the world. There was a massive issue about India burning fossil fuels, and they made a commitment, but it was very watered down. But you've got to bear in mind this. We started the Industrial Revolution in the UK. We were pumping stuff into the atmosphere hundreds of years before anyone else, when people were, living much simpler lives in places like India and in China and the other countries. We started the Industrial Revolution. So we've already pumped all the stuff into the atmosphere that gave us our massive wealth. And, forgive me if I look at my centuries right, but 17th, 18th century, we were creating huge amounts of wealth on the backs of these other economies. We were selling things to them. We were building machinery. We were the heart of the Industrial Revolution. And then we've got the audacity now as first world states to tell countries like India, who have got a population of close to 1.5 billion people, a lot of whom are living in what we would describe as abject poverty. And we're saying, stop industrialising, stop making money. There's got to be more carrots made available to these countries if we're going to ask them to make the sacrifices that we expect them to make. And that's the political conundrum that needs to be resolved. And for those who argue this is a load of rubbish, I hear people saying this, well, I'm afraid it ain't rubbish. It's scientific fact. We can see it in our daily lives that the nature of our globe is changing. And if we don't look after it, then there will come a day when we're watching homes getting swept away in the types of floods, etc., and on a daily basis across the planet. And then the only people we'll have to blame for it is ourselves.
Michael, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but what I do kind of have a difference in opinion is the kind of time frame. Yes, the climate's changing. I think we're seeing the Earth is actually getting hotter, but we also see that the world goes through different cycles over different periods of time. When it gets warmer, it gets colder. I mean, we had the Ice Age in the Victorian Age where the River Thames froze over. and went back to an ice age then. So we know the temperatures can change, but clearly we'll also recognise that this apocalyptic language is probably not helpful as we move forward. But I've got 2 minutes of the programme left, so I want to bring both of you in for the final discussion of what 2022 is going to look like, and can Boris Johnson as our Prime Minister survive into 2022? I'll let you answer that one, Robin. With glee, I think your answer.
No, I don't answer it with glee at all, because if the Conservative Party decide to give him the boot, okay, we've already seen in the last few days there are 2 or 3 contenders have either made it known or others have made it known that they're waiting in the wings. But all that will do is create further chaos, because there will be a period of transition. There will be a period of infighting in the Conservative Party, before a new elected leader is put in place. And of course, the opposition party will say, well, we didn't elect this person as Prime Minister, which opens up a whole other discussion about who do actually we elect at general elections. But, as I said before, Boris has been put on notice by a sizable chunk of the Conservative Party in Parliament that he has one more chance to get it right, to get it sorted out. If not, then, I think he's for the chop. Whether he does or not, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But I expect a bumpy ride, certainly between now and probably January, February, if nothing else, because of what's going on health-wise, in the country.
Michael, within 20 seconds, what are your thoughts? Can Boris survive into 2022?
No. And in terms of, it will be he who wields a knife doesn't wear the crown, and that's why they'll be very careful in the backroom scenes. The big problem is he's made so many blunders in the last few weeks. I just think that there's going to be another one that comes out. There's definitely a concerted effort to get him out. All this stuff hasn't been leaked by accident. There's going to be more, and he'll be gone in the new year.
So, Michael and Robin, thank you so much for being my guests on this kind of special political review of the year that was 2021. I want to thank you for watching this program. Clearly, we've seen that the year 2021 has been a traumatic political year, and we expect nothing less in the year 2022. So thank you for watching this home edition of Politics Today as we reviewed the political year that was 2021.